Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Ria. This is Ellen Evan Co, and in 2025, I'm helping you create and curate your dream wardrobe. This video has taken me months, so many months. This is, I think it's part 9 or part 10 of my concept to creation mini series, but this is like a full length video. If you haven't checked out that mini series, go check it out. Basically how I hacked a pattern to get this beautiful dress, which you guys would have just seen, and basically the process I go to get from the concept in my brain to the completed garment. And oh my gosh, I'm so proud. This is probably one of my best makes ever in terms of technique. Yeah, best technical make to date, I think. And I'm really excited to show you guys how I did it. I was inspired by the House of CB, but this dress in particular, I'll insert a photo of it here. I feel like I've done justice to this dress, to the design, paying homage to it, also making it a little bit different, not exactly the same, but very close. And I could not be happier with how this dress turned out. It's been viral, this sort of style with the paneling and the gathering, and I am just so happy with it. So I really hope you guys enjoy this video. I had a lot of fun making this dress and a lot of fun, getting to this point. So let's get into it. So I started out by cutting all of my pieces in the fashion, fabric, and the lining, and then interfacing as well. I'm just using fusible interfacing for this one. I also cut out my skirt panels. They're this kind of shape. They're going to get gathered up. And as you can see, I've got all my pieces cut out and ready to go. I then went in and fused the fusible interfacing to all of the lining pieces of the bodice. So fusible interfacing is a stabilizer, and it's got heat activated glue on one side. So when you iron the fabric and heat it up and then press the fusible interfacing onto it, it adheres to the fabric and it just gives structure and stabilization to your finished piece of clothing. So with this pattern I created, there are 4 identical mirrored panels for the skirt. So 2 for each side, and I just started by stitching those 2 panels together in the side seam. So I stitched them up on the machine and then I overlocked that seam so it was all nicely enclosed and nicely finished. I then went back to my sewing machine, put my machine on the longest stitch length and did a basting stitch in the seam allowance of the curved part of the skirt. The basting stitch, you don't back stitch at the front or at the end of the seam. You just stitch all the way through on the longest stitch length with a little bit of a looser tension. And you usually do 2 rows of basting stitches to provide a little bit more structure and support. And your basting stitches are what allows you to gather up your stitches or your panels. So here I am, you can see I've taken my basting stitches and I'm just pulling on them slightly to gather up the fabric. And this is what's going to create those beautiful gathered panels that we put in the cutouts to really give that full gorgeous effect with the skirt. After I finished stitching up and gathering the skirt panels, I decided to do the bodice. So I started with the lining. With this dress, the lining has been fully interfaced as we saw in the previous clips, and I just make sure I take a lot of time pinning and sewing up these princess seams because they're curved and it's kind of like reverse curves. It can be a little bit finicky, so take your time with pinning these and take your time with them on the machine as well. Don't forget to clip your seam allowance as well, especially with the curved seams like the princess seams, because clipping the seam allowance will allow the seams to lay flat and give them more smoothness, and it removes the pressure from the seam. But don't clip through the seam itself, just the seam allowance. Okay, so last night I basically ended up stitching the whole bodice lining together. I also then did the other skirt panel, basically stitched it up, overlocked it and gathered it, and I've stitched up the front half of the shell bodice, and I need to put a zip into the back bodice, and I realize I don't have a zip, so I need to go and either get one or use I have white invisible zippers. I don't want to use a white invisible zipper, so I'll probably need to go and buy a blue invisible zipper which is fine, easy done. But I held up, bear with me, I held up the linings. This is the lining here, interface. I held it up to my body, loving the way it looks. It looks great. But I just don't know if there's going to be enough vertical tension. I think I may have to put boning into it because I don't really want to pad this one. I didn't love the way the pads looked in the green one that I made. Like, it's probably not obvious to anyone else, but it's obvious to me. And I just didn't think they looked that good. Like, if you guys have seen the green dress I made, there was like this almost cowl moment in the front with the facing and the pads. So I'm not facing this one. In that dress I lined it and faced it, but in this one I'm just gonna line it. So I think I'm kind of at the stage now where I have to decide if I'm going to bone it or not. What I will probably do for all of these seams, I'll just do the seam allowance as the boning channel, but I might make a separate boning channel for the princess seams because I need to clip these. So I think I'm going to bone it because what's really great about this is that there's a defined spot where the bonings will end. I'm just going to have to make sure I will probably not only have to melt the bones and file them, but I'm probably going to have to cover them in this instance because they're going to end right at the hip and they're going to dig into my hip and be really annoying. Usually if they stop at my waist, I don't have to do that, but because they're going to come all the way down, I want to do this dress justice because I put so much effort into like getting the pattern and the design pretty much perfect, and I'm really proud of that. I want the end result to show that, and I just think I just want it to look really smooth and nice and make my girls look good as well. So I think I'm going to put bones in it, which means I basically have to do that now with the lining, or at least put the channels in. I can't really do anything more on the shell until I get a zip. Oh, I'm going to look at my white zip. Where are you? Got white invisible zippers. You know what? Like, I'm pretty good at putting in invisible zippers these days. The only part you're going to see is this, which is white. But, well, could I dye it? Do I have any blue dye? Looks like if I have any blue dye, I don't think I do. I might just put in a white invisible zip because I don't really want to do the shops or spend any more money. But I think I'm definitely going to put in bones. So next steps is boning and then putting a zip in the shell, and then I can basically start putting it together. But yeah, that's where we're at, adding vertical tension with bones. Before I did anything else, I decided to give the lining a really good press because I hadn't pressed it after I'd clipped those first lot of the seams the night before. So I went in and I finished clipping the seams on the lining and I gave it a really good iron. And then the next step was to prep my back panels of my shell fabric for the zipper. So I've got some more fusible interfacing and I'm basically cutting an inch width the length of the zipper. It'll make a bit more sense in a minute, but I'm cutting one for each side and I like to interface that sort of inch, 5/8 of an inch seam allowance where the zipper will be, just to give it more structure because, you know, you're always pulling on the zip. There's a lot of pressure, there's a lot of tension, there's a lot of movement in that part of the dress. So having the reinforcement and the stability of the fusible interfacing really just adds longevity and more structure to this part of the garment. So here I am just attaching that all the way down. With fusible interfacing, the heat needs to be quite hot to get the glue to activate, but the interfacing fabric itself is synthetic. So you want to not use the iron directly on the interfacing. That's why I'm using like the press cloth and getting the fabric with the interfacing down. We meet again after I've done a little bit more work on the dress last night. When you guys last saw me, I was saying that I was going to just use the seam allowance to make the boning channels on the lining. I realized when I was ironing it all last night that kind of wasn't really going to work because it's so curved. I needed to clip all those seams for them to lay flat. So I think I'm just going to make boning channels, like individual boning channels for each seam, which is fine. So I just want to let you guys know because I know I said I was just going to do the other. I want to sort of show you where we're at. So both skirt pieces are gathered and stitched up and overlocked. I'm really happy with how they're looking as well. 1 second. The front of the shell is sewn together, so side front and center front, and clipped and pressed. And then the full lining, so back, side front and front, is all stitched together and clipped and pressed as well. I need to attach the boning channels onto these seams or next to these seams on all of these for the lining. I can leave the front part of the dress as is for now. The next step is to actually put in the zip. So this is my 2 center back pieces, and last night I interfaced where the zipper will be. So I've basically just interfaced 40-50 centimeters. So I used to, when I was doing zippers, make my whole dress the way I did with the lining and then put in the zipper. But I now usually, if the pattern allows for it, which this one does, I put the zipper in just to the back 2 panels first. So what I'm going to do, and I need to baste, like machine baste the seam, like for the length of the zipper, and then normal stitch, and then put in the zipper. I'll show you guys how I do that. It's my favorite way of doing invisible zippers now, and it's just the best way to do it without getting any buckling or like puckering at the base of the zipper as well, which was something I used to really struggle with. So that's kind of next steps, and then I can attach the side back pieces to this once that's done. I really don't want to go to the shops and buy another zip, so I'm going to trust my skill and put in a white invisible zip and just trust that I can make it really, really, really invisible and no one will notice. Yeah. I can't work on it today because I'm about to go to my real job. I'm about to start my real job, but I'll probably work on it tonight. I just wanted to give you guys an update. I'll make sure I do a detailed installation of the zip because I want to share this method with everyone because it's the best way to put in an invisible zip, but that's where we're at right now. Invisible zip 101. So we're taking our 2 center back panels interfaced along that seam allowance where the zip is going to be. And as you can see, I've got my zip and I'm basically just measuring down to where I want the zip to end. And I'm using a zipper that is significantly longer than what I actually need. And there's a reason for that. So I'm going to put a pin on the center back seam where I want the zipper to stop. And basically I'm going to just machine baste from the top of the back panel all the way down to that pin. So I'm basting, this is all the longest stitch length all the way down to here. And then from that pin onwards, I go back to, well, I do a back stitch, obviously, got to lock that off. And then I go back to a normal machine stitch and I just do a normal machine stitch all the way down the back panel. And then take this back to the ironing board and we're going to press out this seam, which if it's a back seam that you've adjusted, it could be kind of hard because if you're like me and you have a really sway back, this is going to be really curved. So this can kind of be hard to do, but we're going to press this seam open as much as we can. So yeah, I'm just pressing it open all the way down, making it nice and smooth and flat as I can because I have a really curved back. Look at that. Like, girl, why is your back so I literally took like 2.5 inches out of the back seam and it's put that seam almost at like a 45-degree angle. But that's okay. While the seam is still closed, you want to go and lay your invisible zip down over the seam and pin it and then hand baste it. So what I've done is basically laid the coil as flush to the seam as I could, pinned it, and now I'm hand basting it just to the seam allowance. And this is key. It makes sure your zipper is exactly where it needs to be before you open the seam up and before you take your dress back to the sewing machine and stitch it in. So I take my time, hand baste it to the seam allowance. You finish hand basting the zip into the seam allowance, it's then time to seam rip the machine basted seam that you did. So take your time, make sure you're unpicking it but not ripping your fabric because that would be a disaster. and you want to unpick it all the way down to where you backstitch, where we put that original pin, and then you can open your zip up and you can see there's no puckers or anything like that. The zip's exactly where it needs to be. It's at this point that you can go over to the machine, and with your normal zipper foot, you can baste this in. I know it seems like a lot of basting, you know, the hand basting, the basting of the seam, the basting of the zip, but trust me, it's all going to be worth it. And I also tack it down a little bit further. Like I said, I'm using a longer zip. That's just to make sure the zip doesn't move after you put it in. So you're going to machine baste with a normal zipper foot on both sides, all the way down and past where the zipper stops. I actually ended up pulling the zipper all the way down and to the end of the zipper, like past the seam. It's kind of hard to explain, but it was allowing me to like fully get that zipper basted all the way down. And then this gives us just a much clearer idea of how things are looking. It's then time to grab the invisible zipper foot, the goat, the one and only. And this is where the magic happens. The invisible zipper foot, it's such a cool foot. I love it. So the key with putting in a zipper is making sure you're turning out the coil, like slightly pushing the coil out and allowing the needle to get as close to the coil as you can. So as you can see here, I'm using my finger to push the coil to the side, making sure it's sort of staying in that groove and letting the zip get nice and cleanly sewn in there. Oh, this makes me so excited. I love this because when you close the zip, it's invisible. There's no puckers. It looks great. You're so happy with yourself. And all of the hand stitching and the basting and the unpicking, it was worth it. Like that's a white invisible zip in some blue fabric and you can barely tell. I then attached the side back panels to the center back panel. And like I said, it just makes it so much easier putting in the zip first because then I wouldn't have all this excess fabric on either side of my panels. So time to sew these in and then clip them and press them as well. What? Okay. Obviously the middle panel in the front and the back are too long. But the skirt, you guys, I'm so happy with it. This is what I'm doing. This is going to be a halter, so that's cute. But if I pull this down, I just can't get over, like, if you watched the mini series, you'll know how many issues I had with like the drape and the fit of the skirt. I've just attached one panel for now because I just wanted to do one and just see how it went. And I honestly couldn't be more happy with it. Oh my gosh, I need to press this. This needs a good press. I think I am gonna attach like on the inside a little gathered piece that's a bit thicker to sort of push this, to sort of force it to flick out because I'm not gonna line the skirt. Oh my gosh, I love it. And I think definitely a big thing was having this curve in the front be symmetrical to the one in the back. So happy. I was a bit nervous, but I'm really happy. For tension and gravity and all of that sort of thing, I didn't sew up and then down. I matched up the side seam of the skirt with the side seam of the bodice. Well, side seam of the skirt with the side seam of the bodice, and sew down on one side and then sew down on the other because I didn't want to sew up and then down because that would have distorted and stretched and been really weird. I'm going to do the same on the other side. The gathering stitches of my other skirt panel, they tore, they like split, so I have to fully rebaste that and gather it again, but I'll film putting in this skirt panel. And then with the lining, I'm going to bone the lining for sure because this does not have enough vertical tension. I'm even seeing it now, like we're getting creases under the boob and stuff. So it's definitely going to need to be boned, but I just feel like the princess. It's so beautiful. I'm going to have to let it hang as well when it's all made up. Before I hem it, I'm going to have to let it hang and drop because if you cut anything on the bias, whether it's a full bias skirt or anything even slightly on the 45 degree, like on the bias of the fabric, you do need to give it time to stretch and let gravity do its work before you cut into it and hem it. She's good. I'm at that point in my sewing journey now where I'm convinced I can make anything. And I almost didn't end up getting to this point with this dress. I almost was ready to pack it in. But if this turns out half as good as it's like I'm envisioning it to, like now that this is together, when I get clear skin, it's over for you guys. It's over. It was then time to put in the skirt panel. This is pretty self-explanatory. We just match the side seams of the skirt with the side seam of the dress and then match the notches and pin it in. When you're sewing gathers, make sure you're gathering all the fabric that's gathered is at the top of the sewing machine and not where the feed dogs are. That can make it really tedious because the gathers get caught in the feed dogs. And like I said, I sewed from the seam on one side and then the seam to the other, just for gravity's sake. Next step was to create my custom boning channels, which is essentially just the fashion fabric. I pressed it like 1/2 inch and sewed it up to this like pipe, and then I go in and I pin it to the seam and then cut it because these seams are curved a little bit. I like to do it this way to make sure I'm getting them the exact length. And then I stitch them down on the machine. So I just stitch it on one side and on the other, and then it creates this channel that I can put my bones through. And this is really nice. It's a really great way to do it. Actually a little bit nicer than doing it in the seam allowance, and it looks professional, like you've got these custom boning channels. It's really cool. This is a more up close and personal point of view of stitching them down. So you top stitch them on one side of the channel and then top stitch on the other. I'm going to be using 1/4 inch boning. I want to make sure I have more than 1/4 inch to fit them through. You really don't want it to be too snug. So I've sewn all those boning channels down. I now need to go and cut the boning to size and prep to put it in there. And then, well, actually I could probably attach this at this point to the shell at the neckline and then measure my bones. So that's probably what I'm going to do now. I'll pin the shell and the lining together. Okay, I have attached the lining and the shell at the neckline, and I'm a bit annoyed because I thought I was recording, but I wasn't. I wanted to show you guys how to sort of pivot right at the mid-center, at the center front, because it's a very pronounced sweetheart neckline, but the camera wasn't rolling. So we're at this point. I've tried it on. I don't think I want to try it on again until the reveal. What I need to do now is I need to understitch on the lining, and then once I've done that I can sew it up along the rest of the top of the garment, the rest of the dress. So I need to understitch first and then sew here, and then I can put the bones in. The next part is to understitch. So even though I wasn't recording before, when it came to the sweetheart pivot, I can still show you how I pivot for understitching, because you still have to pivot around all of the same like nooks and crannies. Is something I think that can be a bit daunting because it is a bit bulky as well. So I'll show you guys how I do that. If you're not familiar, understitching is where you push the seam allowance to the side of the lining and top stitch the seam allowance to the lining. What this does is takes the weight of the seam allowance, disperses it to the lining, and then stops the lining from poking through out of the fashion fabric. So it just gives you a crisp, clean finish. I know I always use those as my descriptive words, but that's just what you want. You want it to look crispy. Here's a close look at what the understitching looks like from the underside. So as you can see, it's pulled the lining back and the fashion fabric sort of sits over it. You also need to clip your seams. Once again, these are slightly curved, but you don't want to clip through your understitching or your actual seam. I keep saying clip the seams. You don't want to clip the seams. You want to clip the seam allowance. I'm so sorry. Clip the seam allowance. I did notice once I'd done this that the lining was then bigger, and this can happen. It was a bit bigger than the shell. So I trimmed it down, and then I went and stitched the other side of the garment, right sides together. So like the back armhole, I guess, basically closing up the top of the bodice. Okay, so forgive my appearance and my voice. I'm a little bit under the weather. I need to make some decisions now because we're at a point with the dress where it's pretty much almost done, but I thought I wasn't going to need to line the skirt, and I'm realizing now that I do. So I have a little bit of a dilemma. Let me show you what I mean. So I'm at the point where I need to bone the dress. And then my original plan was to not line the skirt. You guys can't really tell, but it was to not line the skirt. And it was basically to put bones in the channels and then like fold the lining of the bodice like over and hand tack it over the raw seams of the skirt of the shell. But since making this, I realized that I'm probably going to need to line the skirt for it to look the nicest and to make the most sense, because if I hand tack it, I have to hand tack it all the way to like so I'd be hand tacking the bodice piece all the way down that front panel, and I just think that that's going to distort the sit and make it a bit bulky, and the tension could be all off, and also that's a lot of hand sewing that I don't particularly want to do. So what I need to do is line the dress, the skirt, but I don't have enough of this color left. So I have this, which mum, if you're watching, I did cut up this bed sheet. My mum gave me this bed sheet. I didn't realize it was brand new. I thought it was old, and I cut it to actually draft one of the skirts when I was drafting the skirt for this particular pattern. But I realized I have enough to cut out lining for this. So, Mum, I am really sorry. I'm sorry I didn't tell you when you asked me if I cut it up. Anyway, oh my gosh. I'm at the point of this cold where I should probably just sit down. Hey, that would make more sense. Oh my goodness. I'm at the point with this cold where I feel well and I want to do a lot of stuff. Like the mental fog is gone, but I just sound gross and keep sniffling. So with this, obviously, this skirt panels here are very, very wide because we have to gather them up. I'm not going to gather the lining because that is a waste of time and resources, waste of fabric. We need to take this part of the skirt and just basically make that dome and cut it on the A-line, make two of them, just enough to fit in these arches because I don't want to gather it. It doesn't have to be excessive. And then I'm basically gonna take this inside out. I basically need to put boning in here, and then I'm just thinking this has a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. I think I'm going to put in the boning so that it finishes an inch off, so there's just a little bit of wiggle room, and then I can attach the lining to the skirt lining to the lining of the bodice with 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then the bones won't get caught in that seam if they're an inch shorter than the channel. So that's what I'm going to do, I think. And then the dress will be pretty much done. The lining, thank God, doesn't have to be the full length of the dress. I can shorten it. But that just means I'd left these seams where the front panel connects with the skirt, I've left them raw because I was obviously thought I was just going to encase it all the way down. But if I don't make this the same length, then this internal panel of the front and back of the lining, because I made it all the same length all the way down, will have to be shortened too, which means these are going to be raw. So I'm probably going to have to overlock them, which is not hard, but it's just I don't like doing it when they're already attached because it kind of looks yucky, but it's okay. I would rather it look a bit yucky than be raw and fraying like that. I'm not disappointed with it. I think lining it is a good idea. I just wish I had factored that in when I cut out the pattern. I don't know why I didn't think I was going to need to line it. I don't know why I thought that what I decided to do was a good idea. But you live and you learn. Oh, I also remembered to put in my tag. I'd realized that I hadn't put my tag into the lining. I always forget to do that, but that's in there now. I just seam ripped that and then sewed it back up. Yeah, I'm going to put Twilight on because I only managed to finish Eclipse. I didn't start Breaking Dawn. I have a love-hate relationship with Breaking Dawn. I think it's so just with Twilight in general. Like, comment down below if you're the same. I know it's cringe. I know it's stupid. The continuity in these films, like, I don't know who was the continuity director for the Twilight saga, but yeah, they didn't do a very good job. But even still, despite how cringy it is, despite the fact that the characters literally have a personality of a doorknob, I still love it. And it's of comfort to me. So while my baby is asleep, while I have the time and the energy, I am going to put Twilight on and work on this. I feel like Twilight has been the movie for this dress. When I did my concept creation, like, real series, I think I mentioned that I'm watching Eclipse as I'm like drafting the pattern and stuff. There's a scene in New Moon when Alice predicts that Bella, or like shows that Bella will be a vampire, and then it happens in Breaking Dawn and how she wears like the two different blue dresses. This is the blue dress that Bella should have worn as she frolicked and hunted with Edward in the woods of Forks. Anyway, I'm delirious. Let's get into it. This here is Ridgeline boning, and Ridgeline is a plastic boning, but it's really versatile and really easy to use. So I go in with Pyrotechnics, I melt the tip of it and give it a good file with my emery board nail file, just to make it so it's not going to like jab into me or tear through the fabric. I then put it into the channel as a whole piece, and I mark where it ends, and then I mark an inch in from that, and that's where I cut it off. I go in again with the Pyrotechnics, I melt the other end, make it all smooth and rounded so it doesn't jab into my hip, and then there we go. We've got a boned channel. We do this for all the other channels. We cut it, we melt it, we file it, we mark it, we cut it, we melt it, we file it. But this is so worth it. It makes the structure, the underneath, it's like the bones of the dress. It's literally, that's exactly what it is. It's boning, but it's like the skeleton. It's the skeleton of the dress. It's so cool. I feel like I talk about fashion or clothing the same way like people talk about the Warhammer figurines that they paint. Do you know what I mean? Or the way a kid talks about rocks. I just get so excited by it. I nerd out for the sewing and the fashion design. But yeah, I'm sure a lot of you who are watching this are the same. When I was attaching the lining of the skirt to the lining of the bodice after I put in the bones, I decided to create this little frilly little insert to just bolster the outer skirt, really. So I just took like 40 centimeters, gathered it up to 20 centimeters and sandwiched it in between the linings. And it just gives this cute little frilly like bench, like this little step, a little seat for the skirt to sit on. And it just snatches my waist a bit and flips that out a bit more. It looks really cute. I thought it was a really clever idea. I saw someone who made a similar dress do this on Reddit. So shout out to that Reddit user. And to make sure that sat as well as it possibly could, after I attached it, I then like top stitched it, well, technically understitched it. So stitched it down and then flipped it back over and top stitched it so it would flick out the same way. Kind of the same way we do when we understitch. It's just to make sure everything sits where it's supposed to sit. At this point, the dress is completely put together, the lining's in, everything's pieced together. My mum came over and she pinned the hem for me. Absolute gem. I had to stand on the table and pivot around while she pinned it over and over and over again until we got it perfect. But what I did was I took that where it was pinned and then I decided to do a rolled hem. So I sewed at 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then I'm going in and I am trimming away all of that excess as close to that stitch as possible without snipping through the stitch. I feel like that's always the way. Stakes are high, but so is the reward. This clip is at like 10x speed. It actually took so long to sew and then cut all of this out. And I was honestly just getting bored of working on the hem after doing these 2 steps. So I went back to the bodice, made the executive decision that I did still need to put pads in it, hand stitch them between the lining and the shell. But then I decided to run this hand basted thread in the seam allowance, like between the understitching at the neckline there. What this does is you sort of feed this through and then you pull on it a little bit, and it just, like, I don't know how to explain it, but it just stops that cowling effect from happening. If you guys remember earlier in the video, I was saying that this sort of happened when I put in the pads with the green dress in the same neckline, but putting this little stitch and then pulling on it just sort of, it gathers the lining a little bit without the gathers showing through on the fashion fabric of the shell. So this is hand stitching. I'm not a massive lover of hand stitching, but I am realizing now that it does have its time, its place, and its utilizations. And this definitely helped a lot because I needed the pads even with the boning. And this just, yeah, made a world of difference. Final steps from there was to complete the hem. So as we saw before, I did the start of the rolled hem, and this is the second part. So we basically fold up 1/4 inch. I used my presser foot as the guide, and then I just did 1/4 inch thickness hem all the way around the perimeter. So again, it took a long time because there's so much fabric because of the gathers, but I really think this was the best way to do it. It is enough to give it enough weight, like that a little rolled hem might not have been able to give, but I think anything larger than 1/4 inch would have just been way too chunky for this style of dress. So I'm really happy with the way it turned out. And without further ado, here's the reveal in 3, 2, 1. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Like I said, it has been months in the making, and this dress has turned out so much better than I thought. I really hope if you're someone that's gotten into sewing, you're self-taught, and you have ideas for designs that you want to create, but you don't know how to get there. I hope that this series has sort of taught you that you don't need to have the most perfect pattern or the most perfect tools to get to your desired result, that you can just kind of tweak and play with patterns that you already have to get something beautiful. That McCall's pattern that I originally used and got to this point is nothing like this dress. Obviously the top is the same, but the bottom is completely different, and I didn't have to buy a new pattern. Okay, yes, it was a lot of trial and error, but I learned so much about drafting throughout the process. And I think that is what I hope I can get across to everyone watching, is that sewing is obviously about the destination because you want to make beautiful clothes, but it's also about the journey and about what you learn along the way. So I hope you guys have learned something. I know I certainly have learned a lot with this project, and I just could not be happier with it. Thanks so much, guys. Bye.